On Thanksgiving, my son and his wife came to visit me. My daughter-in-law gently handed me a cup of hot tea. "Drink it, Dad. It's good for your health." But I looked down at my dog. He was barking in alarm at my feet. Then I looked straight into her eyes. "Should I call you by your real name in Ohio?" Her face turned pale as I poured the tea onto the floor. In less than 30 seconds, the police stormed in, and that was the moment her plan began to fall apart. "I truly appreciate you being here. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. I love seeing how far this reaches." Just a quick note. Some elements in this story are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Names and settings may differ, but the ideas behind it are meant to make you think. When do you know your own family wants to eliminate you? That question hit me hard on a Tuesday morning in the late October, though I didn't have words for it yet. I was standing in my kitchen in Portage, Michigan, a small town where everybody knows your business, but nobody asks the hard questions holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The house was quiet except for the soft padding of Cody's paws on the hardwood floor. My golden retriever? Cody was 9 years old now, the same age he'd been when my wife Margaret passed away 8 years ago. She'd picked him out from the shelter, insisted he was the one, said he had old soul eyes. I remember laughing at her then. I'm not laughing much these days. The morning light was filtering through the kitchen window, catching on the frame photograph of Margaret on the counter. She was smiling in that way she had, genuine, unguarded, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. I picked up the frame, something I do most mornings now. 8 years. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime. Margaret would have been 80 now if she'd lived. We'd planned to travel that year, Portugal maybe, or the Greek islands. We had this whole life mapped out on a piece of notebook paper she kept in her desk drawer. I found it after she was gone. The handwriting was hers. But the dreams on that paper felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. "I miss you," I said to her photograph. It's a stupid habit, I know. But at 72, I've earned the right to have a few stupid habits. Cody looked up at me from his bed in the corner, his golden eyes soft and knowing. He'd been with us both, had watched Margaret fade over those last months, had sat by her bed more than I had, more than I wanted to admit. Dogs know things. They understand loss in a way that's cleaner than human understanding. No denial, no bargaining, just acceptance. Cody had accepted Margaret's absence immediately. I was still working on it. I moved through my morning routine the way I had for 8 years. Coffee, then oatmeal, then the news on the radio, while I washed the dishes. The commentators were talking about politics and weather, and stock markets, things that felt infinitely far away from my kitchen in Portage. I'd retired from engineering work 15 years ago, and I'd never looked back. These days my life was small and manageable. I had my house, nothing fancy, a single-story ranch I'd bought with Margaret in 1989. I had Cody. I had my routines. I had peace, or at least I thought I did. The phone buzzed on the counter around 10:30. It was my son, Mitchell Ashford Jr. We didn't talk as often as we should. Life gets in the way, time disappears, and before you know it, you're having conversations that feel like they're between strangers who happen to share DNA. His name flashed across the screen with a photo I'd taken 2 years ago at his office. He looked tired in that picture. He still looked tired based on the sound of his voice. "Dad," he said when I answered. His voice had that particular quality it gets when he's nervous, a little too bright, like he's trying to convince me and himself simultaneously. "We were thinking about coming out for Thanksgiving, both of us. It's been a while since we've made the trip, and Vicky's really been wanting to spend time with you. She's been saying how much she misses seeing you." Vicky. That's what he called her, had called her, from the moment they had started dating 5 years ago. Diana Mercer was her full name, Mitchell's wife of 8 years. I'd met her plenty of times over those years, had watched her transform from the woman my son had first introduced to me into something harder, more polished, more controlled. She was beautiful in that calculated way. Some women are the kind of beautiful that takes real effort and real money to maintain. Dark hair that always looked freshly done, nails that never chipped, a smile that appeared and disappeared on schedule, like someone else was controlling the switch. "That's good," I heard myself say. "It would be nice to see you both." But even as I said the words, something shifted in my chest. Not quite fear, I'm too old to get scared easily anymore. More like recognition. The way you recognize a song you haven't heard in decades. And it comes back to you, note for note, like your body remembers it before your mind does. Some kind of warning bell buried deep in the place where instinct lives. Great, Mitchell was saying. He was using his work voice now, the one he used when he was closing a deal or managing a situation. Vicky's really excited. She's been talking about it all week. She wants to help with the cooking, spend some real quality time with you. You know how she is. Family means everything to her. That was the lie, I think. Not a lie exactly, but the kind of thing people say when they're trying to convince themselves that everything is normal, everything is fine. Nothing weird is happening here. Vicky didn't do excitement. Vicky did control. I'd watched her with Mitchell over the years, watched the way she managed his schedule, his friendships, his conversations, the way she made decisions that were supposedly joint, but always seemed to work out exactly the way she wanted them to. The way she smiled sweetly while doing all of it, like she was conferring a gift. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time just thinking. The coffee had gone cold, but I picked it up and drank it anyway. The bitterness felt appropriate somehow. Cody had wandered over to his water bowl and was drinking his collar, making small chiming sounds. But then he lifted his head, and his ears perked forward in that specific way they do when something's wrong. Not wrong in the house, nothing that obvious. Wrong in the way dogs sense things that are coming, the future pressing against the present like an unwelcome guest. He let out a low bark, not aggressive, questioning, like he was asking me if I felt it too. Then another bark a little sharper this time. His body had gone rigid alert in a way I hadn't seen since Margaret's final days. I walked over and ran my hand along his back, feeling the warmth of him, the solidness. "What is it, boy?" I asked him. "What are you trying to tell me?" Cody barked again, and this time he walked to the front window. He pressed his nose against the glass, his breath fogging the surface, and he didn't look back at me. He just stared out at the empty street beyond, his entire body radiating an alertness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up straight. I joined him at the window. Portage was beautiful that time of year. The trees were turning gold and red. The air had that crisp quality that makes you feel alive and mortal all at once. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked normal, the kind of normal you find in small towns where nothing bad happens, or at least nothing that people talk about. But Cody knew something I didn't. He knew that in less than a month, my life would become the kind of story that makes people shake their heads in disbelief. The kind that makes you wonder how someone survives a thing like that, how someone comes out the other side. He knew somehow that the danger wasn't coming from outside that window at all. It was coming from inside my own family. The car pulled into my driveway just after 3 in the afternoon on a gray Wednesday. I'd been watching from the front window, not in a creepy way. Just the way you do when you're expecting someone you haven't seen in months. Mitchell was driving his silver sedan, the one he'd bought right after he married Diana. It looked expensive and impersonal, like everything else about their life together. As soon as the car came to a stop, Mitchell got out and stretched, his face already twisted in that expression he gets when he's about to complain about something. "That drive was brutal, Dad," he said, even before he'd made it all the way up the walkway. Construction on 94 traffic backed up for miles. Vicky was on her phone the whole way. Work crisis. Of course, when is there not a work crisis? He was rambling the way he always does when he's stressed. I let him get it out of his system while Cody and I waited on the porch. My dog was sitting beside me, alert, ears perked forward in that way that had become more frequent over the past few weeks. Then Diana emerged from the passenger side of the car, and I understood immediately why Cody had been pacing all morning. She was dressed for a photo shoot, a cream-colored cashmere sweater, perfectly fitted black pants boots that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her dark hair was styled in waves that looked effortless, but almost certainly took an hour at some high-end salon. But it was her face that got me. The smile she directed at me was brilliant and warm and completely, utterly false. I've been married. I've been around women my whole life. I know the difference between a real smile and a performance, and this was pure performance. "Dad!" she called out, and the word hit me like a small electric shock. Not Robert, not Mr. Ashford. Dad, as if 8 years of sporadic holiday visits and polite dinners made her entitled to the same intimacy that Margaret and I had built over 40 years of marriage. She walked toward me with her arms open, and that's when I caught the scent. Expensive perfume, the kind that costs more than some people's rent. It was cloying, almost aggressive, designed to announce itself to make sure everyone in the room knew that the woman wearing it had money and taste, or at least wanted people to think she did. "It's so good to see you," Diana was saying, and she pulled me into an embrace that lasted just slightly too long. Her hand lingered on my shoulder, and I could feel the coolness of her rings through my shirt. "We've missed you so much. Haven't we, Mitch?" I was just telling him on the drive that we don't spend nearly enough time together. Mitchell nodded enthusiastically from somewhere behind her, and I caught his eye. There was something in his expression that made my stomach tighten a kind of desperation. Like, he was hoping I'd confirm that, yes, we definitely needed to spend more time together. Like, he needed my agreement to make it real. When Diana finally released me, I turned to look at Cody. My dog was standing perfectly still, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on Diana with an intensity I'd rarely seen before. This wasn't the casual alertness of this morning. This was something different. This was a warning. "Cody," Diana said, reaching down toward him with her perfectly manicured hand. "Come here, boy. Don't you remember me?" Cody didn't move, didn't come forward. Instead, he let out a low growl, not aggressive, but unmistakably clear. A line drawn, a boundary marked. Diana's hand dropped, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Irritation, frustration. It was gone so fast, I almost questioned whether I'd seen it at all. "He's just not good with people sometimes," Mitchell offered apologetically, already reaching down to pat Cody's head. My dog tolerated it the way he tolerated most things. But his eyes never left Diana. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with the kind of forced pleasantness that makes families exhausting. Diana helped me set the table, or rather, she rearranged everything I'd already done because apparently the forks needed to go to the left instead of the right. She had opinions about the placemats, the way I'd arranged the flowers on the table, whether the living room curtains should be drawn or open. Each suggestion came wrapped in a smile and a comment about how she just wanted everything to be perfect for our special family time. Then came dinner. Diana had taken over my kitchen with the kind of efficiency that felt more like an invasion than an offer of help. She was making something with chicken and some kind of cream sauce, and it smelled good enough. But when she set the plate in front of me, she did something that made my mouth go dry. "I made this with you in mind," she said, her voice dripping with affection. "Mitch told me this is your absolute favorite meal, the one Margaret used to make for you on special occasions. I wanted to honor that tradition, keep Margaret's memory alive by making what she made for you." I looked at the plate, I looked at Diana, and I looked at Mitchell, who was busily examining his own dinner with sudden intense interest. I had never told Mitchell that this was my favorite meal. I had never mentioned it to Diana, and Margaret had never made this particular dish, not once, not ever. Margaret had been a terrible cook. Actually, we'd laughed about it for years. She'd usually order Chinese food and pretend she'd made it herself. The contradiction sat in my chest like a stone. After dinner, Diana moved to the stove, and I heard the soft whistle of a kettle. She returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs of tea, one for her, one for me. The steam rose from the cup in delicate curls, and the smell was something herbal and unfamiliar. Herbal tea. Diana said, setting the cup down on the side table next to my chair. "It's very good for you. Helps with digestion, circulation, sleep. You'll feel so much better after you drink it." She said it with such certainty, such familiarity with my health needs that I'd never shared with her. She said it like she knew exactly what I needed, exactly what was wrong with me. I looked down at the steaming cup. Then I looked at Cody, who had positioned himself directly in front of me, his entire body tense. His eyes locked on the tea as if the cup itself was something he needed to protect me from. For the first time that afternoon, I made a decision based purely on instinct. "No, thank you," I said, and I set the cup down on the table without touching it. I'm not really a tea person. The silence that followed was like a physical thing. Diana's smile didn't waver, but something happened behind her eyes. Something ancient and cold and utterly without warmth. For just a moment, less than a second really, I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. It was the look of someone whose plan had just encountered an unexpected complication. The look of someone calculating, deciding, adjusting. Then the smile snapped back into place, and she laughed a bright musical sound that seemed to belong to a completely different person. "Oh, I understand," she said, her voice once again dripping with false sweetness. "More for me then." But she didn't drink the tea either. She just left it sitting on the table untouched, cooling slowly in the gathering darkness of the late afternoon. And Cody never took his eyes off that cup. If you're still here, comment "still here," so I know you're following along with me. And be honest, if you were in my place standing in front of that cup of tea, when everything looks normal, but something feels off, would you drink it or would you stop and check first? And before we go further, just a quick note, some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. Not everything reflects reality exactly, but the message behind it is still worth paying attention to. I woke up around 6:30 that Thursday morning to the sound of pots and pans clanging in the kitchen. For a moment, I forgot where I was in the sequence of events, forgot that Mitchell and Diana were here, that my house had been invaded by the kind of noise and activity that doesn't belong in a place like mine anymore. I lay in bed for another minute or two, listening to the rhythmic sounds of someone preparing breakfast. Someone who had made herself completely at home in my kitchen, moving through it with the casual authority of someone who'd already claimed ownership. When I finally got up and shuffled downstairs in my slippers, I found Diana standing at the stove in a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. She was flipping what looked like eggs with the kind of focused intensity she probably brought to everything, as if cooking breakfast was a competition and she was determined to win. Her dark hair was already styled, her makeup already applied. How she'd managed that in a house where the bathroom mirror was small and the light was terrible remained a mystery. She looked like someone who'd stepped out of a magazine advertisement, not like someone preparing breakfast in a 72-year-old widower's kitchen on a Thursday morning in Michigan. "Good morning, Dad," she called out when she saw me, that same bright smile snapping into place like someone had flipped a switch. "I thought you'd like a healthy breakfast. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit. And I have something special for you." From the counter beside the stove, she produced a small brown bottle with a cork stopper. No label, no ingredients list, no expiration date, no manufacturer's name. Just a cloudy glass container that looked like it had come from someone's basement kitchen experiment or a health food store from the 1970s. The kind of bottle that should have set off alarm bells in my head immediately. The kind of bottle that screamed caution. "Vitamin supplement," Diana said, already shaking something into a small glass. 2 tablets or maybe capsules, it was hard to tell, dropped into her palm with a soft rattling sound. "From Ohio. A special blend. Very beneficial for men your age. Helps with energy, circulation, joint health, memory. Everything, really. You'll feel like a new person." She held the glass out toward me with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Many times, probably. To someone else, maybe. Someone who wasn't as skeptical as I was. Someone who trusted her completely. Someone like my late wife, Margaret. I looked at the tablets. I looked at Diana. I looked at the glass. Then I made a decision that probably saved my life. "You know what?" I said, keeping my voice light and conversational. "Let me watch you take one first. Make sure they're as great as you say. I'd love to see how you react to them." The smile froze on her face for just a fraction of a second. It was barely noticeable, the kind of micro-expression that most people would have missed entirely. But I was watching for it, and I caught it. I caught the moment when the mask slipped and something raw and dangerous showed through. I caught the moment when her carefully constructed persona cracked. "Oh, I don't actually take these myself," Diana said, and her voice had lost some of its honeyed quality. It was flatter now, more matter of fact, more like the truth if I was being honest. "They're really more of a male-specific formula, different needs and different dosages." "Is that so?" I said, and I was already reaching for the glass. "Well, then let's put them in my milk instead. I'm having a full glass of milk with my breakfast anyway." I took the tablets from her hand before she could object, and I deposited them directly into a glass of whole milk that was sitting on the counter. The tablets dissolved almost immediately, breaking apart into a murky suspension that turned the white milk slightly gray and cloudy. I watched Diana's face as I did this. I watched her jaw tighten, her eyes narrow. Her hand reach out as if to stop me, and then pull back. I watched the calculation happening behind her eyes as she decided what move to make next. "Dad, I'm not sure that's..." She started, her voice tight. "It's fine," I said, cutting her off, and I took a long sip from the glass. It tasted bitter and chemical, nothing like regular milk. It tasted like something that absolutely should not be inside a human body. It tasted like death, if death had a flavor. I made a show of swallowing it, made sure Diana could see me do it, and then set the glass down on the counter, like nothing was wrong. What was wrong was everything. What was wrong was that my hands were already shaking slightly from the taste of it. What was wrong was that I was standing in my own kitchen, drinking something that tasted like poison, and the woman in the silk robe was watching me with an expression that had shifted from concern to barely concealed rage. What was wrong was that I'd just consumed something that could kill me, all in the name of gathering proof. Mitchell was still sleeping upstairs. Sarah Mitchell and her recording devices were in the spare bedroom. The unmarked car with 2 officers was parked outside in the trees. I grabbed my dog's attention when Diana turned back to the stove, pretending to focus on the eggs with renewed intensity. "Come here, boy," I said quietly, and Cody padded over to me, his tail wagging in that trusting, uncomplicated way that dogs have. The way that made my chest ache knowing what I was about to do. I poured a small amount of the milk with the dissolved tablets, into a dish, and set it on the floor beside me. Cody sniffed it cautiously, his nose working the way it always did when he encountered something new. Then he began to lap it up. My dog has never been a picky eater, and he certainly wasn't picky now. He consumed the small amount of milk with the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for his regular meals. I watched him. I watched his tongue work. I watched him swallow. I watched him finish every drop. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 2 minutes. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. That's when his entire body went rigid. Cody made a sound I'd never heard him make before, a kind of strangled whimper that came from deep in his throat. He stumbled backward, his legs suddenly uncoordinated, his breathing shallow and labored. His brown eyes went wide with confusion and fear. His stomach heaved, and then he was sick, violently and completely, his body convulsing as he tried to expel whatever he'd consumed. Cody. I moved toward him, immediately kneeling down beside my dog, my hand on his trembling back. I felt his muscles spasm beneath my palm. I felt the heat of his body as he suffered through this chemical assault. I caught sight of Diana's face reflected in the window above the sink. For just a moment, less than a second, I saw pure undiluted terror. Not concern for the dog, not worry or empathy. Terror. The kind of look someone gets when their plans have just started to unravel in front of them. The look of someone watching something they'd carefully constructed collapse. Then she was beside me, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh no, poor Cody. What's wrong with him?" "Must be the milk," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my entire body was vibrating with adrenaline. "He must be lactose intolerant. I should have remembered. I'll clean this up." I didn't look at her. I didn't want to see whether she believed me or not. I just kept my hand on Cody's back, feeling him tremble, feeling the reality of what she'd tried to do settling into my bones like ice water. The vitamins from Ohio weren't vitamins at all. And Diana, or whatever her real name was, had just made a very serious mistake. She'd shown me that she was willing to poison my dog to test whether the tablets would work on me. She'd shown me the full extent of what she was capable of. She'd shown me that she had no regard for life, not even the life of an innocent animal. And now I knew. Now I had proof sitting in my dog's system, making him sick enough to prove that whatever those tablets contained, they were absolutely lethal. The poison was real. The threat was real. The danger was immediate and absolute. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The answer was already in motion. Sarah was listening. The officers were waiting. And Diana had just provided the first piece of undeniable evidence that would eventually put her away for the rest of her life. The moment Mitchell's car pulled out of the driveway to pick up what he'd left at some storage unit an hour away, I was moving. I didn't have a plan exactly. What I had was urgency, the kind that comes from knowing, with absolute certainty, that something deeply wrong was happening in my own home. Cody was still recovering from whatever she'd given him, lying in his bed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from a body fighting off poison. I'd cleaned up his mess, given him fresh water, and he'd looked at me with those old soul eyes that Margaret had loved, as if asking me whether I understood now, whether I finally saw what he'd been trying to warn me about. I did. I understood. The guest bedroom, their bedroom. Mitchell and Diana's room felt like stepping into someone else's life entirely. The bed was made with military precision. The closet was organized by color, a level of fastidiousness that somehow made my skin crawl. Everything about the space felt curated like a stage set, designed to convey a certain image of domesticity that didn't actually exist. I started with the nightstands. Diana's nightstand held a book, some kind of wellness manual about extending your lifespan, a phone charger, a bottle of expensive face cream, and a phone. I didn't touch the phone. That felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross, not yet. But I noted its presence. It was Mitchell's nightstand that held the first real discovery, a credit card statement from a bank I didn't recognize showing charges to something called Ashford Estate Holdings, LLC. The amounts were staggering, thousands of dollars transferred monthly to an account Mitchell clearly didn't know anything about. based on the way his voice got small when Diana was around. But it was what I found under Diana's pillow that made my blood go completely still. A bottle. Small prescription orange, the kind you get from a pharmacy. The label was faded, worn from handling, like someone had picked it up and set it down hundreds of times. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. The name on the label wasn't Diana. It read, Victoria Chambers, benzodiazepine prescription. Take 1 tablet at night for anxiety. Do not exceed recommended dosage. Keep away from children and pets. Victoria Chambers. Not Diana Mercer, not Vicky, Victoria Chambers. I stood there in the middle of their bedroom, holding a prescription bottle with a name I'd never heard before, and I felt the floor shift slightly beneath my feet. This wasn't just deception. This was systematic, premeditated identity fraud. She'd built an entire false life, a false name, a false identity, and married my son while wearing it like a mask. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and typed the name into my notes. Victoria Chambers. I repeated it to myself several times, committing it to memory, understanding that this name, this real name, was the key to understanding who this woman actually was. The question became, why? Why would someone adopt an entirely false identity, marry into a family, and then begin systematically poisoning them? What was the end game? Was it money? Was it something darker? I was still standing there, the bottle in one hand and my phone in the other, when I heard the car door slam outside. My stomach dropped. It was too soon. Mitchell wasn't supposed to be back for at least another hour, unless something had changed, unless he'd forgotten something. Unless... The footsteps came up the driveway and I heard the front door open. "Hello," Mitchell called out. "Dad, I forgot my wallet. Thought I should turn around." I shoved the bottle back under the pillow, not as carefully as I should have, but carefully enough. I was already halfway down the stairs when Mitchell appeared at the bottom, looking surprised to see me coming down from upstairs so quickly. "Dad," he said, his voice confused. What were you doing up there?" Think fast. "Looking for an extra blanket?" I said, keeping my voice levels conversational, as if I hadn't just discovered that his wife was living under an assumed name with a prescription for tranquilizers she wasn't supposed to exceed. "I thought there might be some winter blankets up there from last year. Your mother always kept extras." It was a lie. There were blankets in the linen closet downstairs. Mitchell knew there were blankets in the linen closet downstairs. But he was tired, and he'd been driving, and he was probably thinking about whatever errand he'd forgotten about. He nodded slowly, accepting the explanation in that way people do when they're not quite awake and the explanation is convenient. "Oh, okay. Yeah, we should probably get more blankets anyway. I'll remind Vicky to pick some up when we get home." Vicky. He called her Vicky. She'd told him her name was Vicky, and he'd never questioned it. How many conversations had they had where he used that name? How many times had he introduced her to people as Vicky Mercer, never knowing that he was introducing them to a ghost, to a carefully constructed fiction? "Sure," I said, and I let him pass me on the stairs. "Good idea." I watched him grab his wallet from the nightstand. His nightstand, not the one where he thought his wife was hiding her true identity. And then I watched him leave again, the car backing out of the driveway with the kind of carelessness that comes from someone who has no idea that his entire life is built on a foundation of lies. When he was gone, I went back upstairs. The bottle was still there under the pillow. I picked it up again this time, photographing the label with my phone. Victoria Chambers, benzodiazepine, don't exceed dosage. She'd lied about her name. She'd poisoned my dog. She'd tried to poison me. And the person she'd married, my son, had no idea that any of this was happening. He had no idea that the woman sleeping beside him every night was wearing a mask, and that behind that mask was someone capable of things I was only beginning to understand. I had to figure out what she wanted. I had to understand why she was here, what her endgame was before she made another move, before she tried again. Because she would try again. That much was certain. The attic was colder than I remembered. Dusty. The kind of place where time goes to die, where things you think you've moved past have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. I climbed up through the pull-down ladder around midnight after I had made sure that both Mitchell and Diana were asleep. Cody followed me up, picking his way carefully across the beams. His presence beside me, the only thing that felt real in the darkness. I had a specific memory, a wooden box, Margaret's box. She'd had it for years, kept things in it that mattered to her. I'd seen her add to it over time. Watching her place something inside, and then closed the lid with a kind of finality that suggested she didn't want to look at whatever it was again, at least not until after she was gone. The attic was crammed with the detritus of a life lived: old suitcases, Christmas decorations, in faded boxes, furniture from different eras of our marriage stacked haphazardly against the walls. But I knew where Margaret's box would be. She'd always been organized even about the things she wanted to hide. I found it on a shelf against the far wall underneath some old blankets. It was made of oak, simple in design, but Margaret's name was carved into the top in her own careful handwriting. Margaret Ann Ashford. Just seeing it made my chest tighten. Inside the box were two things: a journal bound in deep red leather and a sealed envelope with my name written across it in Margaret's familiar handwriting. Robert. Just my name, but the way she'd written it, the care in each letter told me everything. This was something she'd been planning, something she'd been preparing for. I opened the envelope first. The letter inside was written on Margaret's favorite paper, the cream-colored kind with the subtle texture that she'd ordered specially from some catalog. The first lines hit me like a physical blow. Robert, if you're reading this, then I've already left you, and I'm sorry for that, sorrier than you'll ever know. But there's something you need to understand, something I should have told you sooner, but was too afraid to face. It's about Diana, it's about Mitchell, and it's about a danger that's been hiding in plain sight. My hands started to shake. Margaret, 8 years gone. Margaret who I'd watched fade away over those last terrible months. Margaret who'd spent her final days in and out of consciousness, her body refusing to cooperate with her mind's determination to stay with me a little longer. Margaret who I'd assumed had died of the cancer that had ravaged her cells for years. Margaret had known something. Robert, I need you to listen to me. When Mitch first told me about Diana, something felt wrong. I can't explain it the way someone could explain it, who understands psychology or whatever it is that makes a person dangerous. But I felt it, in the same way Cody would feel it years later. I felt something off about her, something that didn't add up. I sat down on the cold attic floor, Cody settling beside me, his warm body pressed against my leg. My dog rested his head on my thigh, as if he understood that I was about to read something that would break something open inside me. It started small. I would hear Mitch on the phone with her, and his voice would sound different, smaller, like he was apologizing for things he'd done wrong, things he didn't actually do wrong. She had this way of making him doubt himself. I watched it happen over months, this slow erosion of his confidence. And then I noticed something else. The letter continued, and as I read, the pieces started to fall into place. Margaret had noticed things, small things. Diana bringing Margaret tea that made her stomach hurt. Diana insisting that Margaret's medication was wrong, that the doctors had gotten it backwards. Diana suggesting alternative treatments that Margaret's oncologist specifically advised against. Diana, always so helpful, always so concerned, always so present. I had blood work done privately, Robert. Tests that my regular doctor didn't order, and I found things. Substances in my system that didn't belong there. Things that someone had been putting in my food. Things that were making the cancer spread faster, that were weakening my body's ability to fight. I wanted to tell you. God knows I wanted to tell you. But I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what it would do to Mitchell. Afraid that if I said it out loud, you wouldn't believe me. Who would believe that the woman their son loved was slowly poisoning them? The word sat there on the page, poisoning. My wife. My Margaret. She hadn't died of cancer alone. She'd been murdered by Diana, no, by Victoria, by whoever this woman actually was, and she'd known it, and she'd been too afraid, or too protective of Mitchell to tell me until after she was already gone. I don't have proof that would hold up in court, Robert. What I have are these suspicions and these test results and the knowledge in my bones that something is terribly, terribly wrong. So I'm writing this down. I'm putting this in the attic where I hope you'll find it someday. And I'm praying that when you do, it won't be too late. That you'll read this and understand that you need to protect yourself. That you need to protect Mitchell, even if he doesn't understand that he needs protecting. Beis defos terasorcistas preexterend. The letter went on describing the physical symptoms Margaret had experienced, the strange timing of Diana's visits. The way Diana would smile in that particular way whenever Margaret would complain about feeling worse. Margaret had documented it all, not with the rigor of a scientist, but with the careful observation of a wife who knew her own body and knew something was very wrong. And then, at the very end, one final sentence that made my blood run cold. Robert, I believe she's done this before. I believe Diana has hurt other people. I'm afraid of what she's capable of. Please, when you read this, believe me. And please keep yourself safe. I love you, Margaret. I sat there in the darkness of the attic, holding my wife's letter in shaking hands. Cody pressed against me, and I understood finally what Margaret had been trying to tell me all along. It wasn't just about her. It was about all of us. It was about a woman who had learned how to poison people and had decided to make it her life's work. And I was next. The red leather journal was heavier than it looked, and when I opened it, the pages released the smell of time, old paper dust, the faint ghost of Margaret's perfume still clinging to the leather binding. I opened to the first entry dated March 15th, 7 years ago, almost exactly 4 months before Margaret's cancer diagnosis, exactly 1 week after Mitchell had brought Diana to meet us for the first time. March 15th, 2018. Robert is at work. Mitchell and Diana are still here. They're supposed to leave tomorrow. I've been watching her. I know that sounds paranoid, but I can't help it. There's something off about the way she moves through our house. It's like she's studying it, like she's committing every detail to memory. This afternoon I saw something that made my stomach turn. I kept reading my hands steady, despite the violent trembling in my chest. Diana brought soup from the deli for lunch. She made a big production of it, made sure to serve everyone herself, which seemed odd. As she was pouring the soup into a bowl for Robert, I saw something drop into the pot, just for a second. A small white tablet the size of an aspirin dissolving into the broth. It happened so fast, I almost questioned whether I'd actually seen it. But I had. I know I had. I watched Diana serve the soup. I watched Robert take a spoonful. I felt my heart stop. And then I did something I've never done before I lied to Robert. I told him the soup looked spoiled, that the deli must have left it out too long. He believed me. He put the bowl down. Diana smiled, and if a smile could contain a lie, hers did. But here's what terrifies me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of carelessness. This was deliberate, calculated. She knew what she was doing. As I turned the page, my throat tight. March 17th, 2018. I followed Diana into the bathroom this morning when she went in after her shower. I told her I was looking for a hair clip, a transparent lie, but she accepted it anyway. The medicine cabinet was open. She was standing in front of it examining the bottles, each one, slowly, reading the labels, the pills, the supplements, the heart medication Robert takes. She was learning, studying, planning. When she saw me, she smiled that smile again, that careful, practiced smile. "Just looking at Margaret's skincare routine," she said. "You have such beautiful skin. I'd love to know your secrets." But she wasn't looking at skincare. She was reading my prescriptions. That's when I heard Mitch on the phone in the hallway. He was talking to someone at work, or maybe a friend. His voice carried through the thin walls of this old house. "She's not going to be around much longer," Diana said, and I froze. Just froze. My hand on the bathroom counter, unable to move. The mother, I mean, she's already sick. And it's just going to get worse. It's sad but inevitable. When it happens, Robert will need someone to help him, someone to be there for him, someone to take care of him. I heard Mitch respond, but his words were muffled. I heard Diana laugh, that bright musical laugh that everyone loves. "Oh, I know he will. That's what families are for. We take care of each other." The bathroom suddenly felt very small, very cold. The entries continued becoming more detailed, more urgent. Margaret had started documenting things. The meals Diana had prepared, the number of times she'd seen Diana near Margaret's medications, the pills that had gone missing from bottles, the strange side effects Margaret had begun experiencing, nausea that came and went, pain in her stomach, a level of fatigue that her doctors couldn't explain. April 3rd, 2018. I had private blood work done. Told my doctor I was worried about my thyroid, but what I really wanted was a full screening. The results came back yesterday. Dr. Peterson called me himself, which means it's serious. There are substances in my blood, multiple substances, things that shouldn't be there, things that he said are known to interact negatively with certain cancer medications, accelerating their effects. He asked me if I'd been taking anything I didn't tell him about. Supplements from the internet, alternative medicines. I told him no, but I know where they came from. I know who put them there. The final entry was dated 1 month before Margaret's cancer diagnosis. 1 month before everything she'd feared would come true. April 28th, 2018. I can't prove it. That's what keeps running through my mind. I have suspicions and observations and blood work that shows something is wrong, but nothing that proves Diana did this intentionally. A lawyer would laugh at me. The police would dismiss me. Robert would think I was sick in the head imagining things. Mitch would deny it immediately, would choose his wife over his mother without hesitation. So I'm saying nothing. But I'm writing this down. I'm putting it somewhere safe, and I'm making peace with what I suspect is going to happen. If my cancer progresses faster than it should, if I don't have as much time as my doctors say I will, I want someone to know the truth. I want Robert to know that I fought in my own way, that I knew. That Diana Chambers, and I'm certain now that Diana Mercer is not her real name, is far more dangerous than anyone understands. And I'm terrified she's done this before. The last entry dated 3 months before Margaret's death was the one that broke me. July 15th, 2018. The cancer is progressing faster than Dr. Peterson predicted. He said it's unusual. He said sometimes bodies are just stubborn that way. He doesn't know about the substances, about Diana, about the slow poisoning that's been happening alongside the natural disease. If something happens to me, Robert, if I die sooner than anyone expects, please know this. It wasn't just the cancer. Diana Chambers accelerated it. She poisoned me, slowly, methodically. With the precision of someone who's done this before, I am certain she will come for you next. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. But please believe me. Please protect yourself. And if you can protect Mitchell, he doesn't understand what he's married to. Margaret. I sat in the attic darkness, the red diary heavy in my hands, and understood with absolute clarity that the woman downstairs in my house had murdered my wife, not with her own hands, but with intention, with calculation, over months and months of careful, methodical poisoning. And now Diana Victoria, whoever she was, had come for me. There was another envelope underneath the diary. I almost missed it. At first it was tucked between the back pages of the journal, sealed with the same careful precision as the first. The envelope was heavier than the first one had been, suggesting it contained more than just a single letter. My name was written across it in Margaret's handwriting. Robert, read this last. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a letter, and beneath the letter, a single sheet of paper with a title at the top, If Diana Returns a Checklist. The letter itself was shorter than the first one, more direct, more urgent. Robert, if you're reading this checklist, then I was right to be afraid. Diana has come back into your life, and if she's following the same pattern she followed with me, then she's already begun to make her moves. I can't prove what she's done. I couldn't when I was alive, and I certainly can't now that I'm gone. But what I can do is give you the tools to recognize her methods. What I can do is arm you with knowledge of how she operates, the patterns, the behaviors, the red flags that will tell you exactly what she's planning. Please, Robert, read this list carefully. And please trust yourself. You've always been good at seeing what others miss. Below that was the checklist written in Margaret's careful handwriting, organized and precise. Diana's methods, signs to watch for. 1. Unlabeled supplements or vitamins. She will offer you things that don't have clear labels. Origin unknown, purpose unclear. She'll say they're special or imported or from a trusted source. Don't take them, not even one. 2. Hot beverages particularly offered late at night, tea, coffee, warm milk, anything hot that she personally prepares and hands to you. She uses this method because hot liquid can mask the taste of almost anything, and the darkness of evening gives her cover. If she offers you something hot, refuse it, every time. 3. Excessive sweetness and forced intimacy. She will be too kind, too interested in your well-being, too eager to help with meals, medications, personal care. She will use pet names, Dad, Honey, Sweetheart, to create false familiarity. This is manipulation. This is control. The woman doing this does not love you. She loves what she thinks she can take from you. 4. Time spent alone in your bathroom or near your medications. She will find reasons to be alone near your prescriptions, in your bathroom, in your bedroom, in any space where your personal items are kept. She is learning, she is studying, she is planning. 5. Conversations with an unknown contact. I heard her on the phone with someone as she called only by a first name Amber, I think. They seemed to speak in code, as if they had a shared understanding of something dark. There may be more than one person involved in this. Diana may not be working alone. 6. Physical symptoms that don't match your medical history. Watch for nausea that comes without reason, dizziness, fatigue that's deeper than normal tiredness, stomach pain, headaches. If these symptoms appear particularly after meals Diana has prepared or beverages she's offered, take note. Document them. These are not natural aging. These are signs. 7. Sudden interest in your will, your finances, your medical decisions. She will ask questions about your will, about your accounts, about what happens to your assets if something were to happen to you. She will volunteer to help manage your medications or make medical decisions. Every question is reconnaissance. Every offer is a step toward control. 8. Attempts to isolate you from others. She will subtly discourage visits from friends. She will make suggestions about why certain family members don't understand you. She will position herself as the only one who truly cares. Isolation is her advantage. Fight against it. The list went on 8 more points that seemed to catalog every predatory behavior I'd witnessed over the past few days, behaviors that Margaret had documented over the course of a year. But beneath the checklist was Margaret's final instruction, written in a slightly different hand, more urgent the letters, less careful, as if she'd written it quickly in a moment of clarity or fear. Robert, I need you to understand something. Every single thing on this list, every pattern, every behavior, every warning sign comes from personal observation. I watched Diana do these things. I documented them, I studied her, the way you might study a dangerous animal. And what I learned is that she is very, very good at what she does, which means she has done this before. I don't know how many women like me have died thinking their deaths were natural. I don't know how many husbands like you have been next on her list. But I know this: she is methodical. She is patient. She is willing to wait months, even years, for an opportunity. And she will not stop. The only thing that will stop her is if someone proves what she's done. If someone takes action. If someone believes you enough to investigate. So, here's what I'm asking you to do, Robert. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. The moment you feel that something is wrong, the moment you sense danger from her, act on it. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for certainty. Don't let Mitchell's love for her or your own desire to believe the best in people prevent you from protecting yourself. And if when she returns, call the police. Tell them everything. Give them this letter, give them this diary, give them every scrap of evidence you can find. They may not believe you at first. They may tell you that you're paranoid. But if you're persistent, if you're detailed, if you show them these records, they will have to investigate. Trust yourself, Robert. You've always had good instincts. Don't fail me now. Margaret, I sat in the attic darkness, holding both letters and the checklist, and ran through the list in my mind. Unlabeled vitamins. Yes. The bottle from Ohio, no label, no ingredients. Hot beverages. Yes. The tea on the first night. The offer of warm drinks again and again. Excessive sweetness. Yes. The constant dad. The false smile. The performative kindness. Time alone near medications. Yes. I'd seen her in the bathroom examining my prescriptions. Unknown contact. Yes. I'd need to check Mitchell's phone records or ask him directly. Physical symptoms. I hadn't experienced any yet. I'd refused that the vitamin, refused the tea. But if I'd accepted them, if I'd been less careful. Isolation. She'd been subtly discouraging calls to friends, suggesting that old college buddies probably didn't understand me anymore. Financial questions. She'd asked just casually what would happen to the house if something happened to me. Every single item on Margaret's list matched my experience over the past few days. It was like Margaret had written out a blueprint of Diana's attack and Diana had followed it perfectly, unaware that the blueprint existed. Margaret had prepared for this. Margaret had known. And Margaret had left me a map. I gathered both letters, the diary and the checklist, and I made my decision. I couldn't sit in this attic all night reading about a murder that had already happened. I couldn't wait for Diana to try again. I couldn't let Mitch remain ignorant of what his wife really was. It was time to call the police. I pulled out my phone and dialed my finger steady despite the trembling in my chest. When the dispatcher answered, I asked for the sheriff's office and told them I needed to report a crime. Not a crime in progress. A crime that had already happened. A crime that had gone undetected for 7 years. And then I told them about Margaret, and about Diana, and about the fact that there was a poisoner sleeping in my guest bedroom and she was planning to poison me next. I hadn't slept. That seemed important to note as I sat in my kitchen at 5 in the morning, watching the darkness gradually give way to the gray light of early November. Cody was alert beside me. His ears perked forward with that same watchfulness he'd maintained all night. Neither of us could rest, not after what I'd read in Margaret's diary. Not after making that phone call to the sheriff's office. The coffee in my mug had gone cold an hour ago, but I held it anyway, needing something to hold, needing the small weight of it in my hands. I thought back to 3 weeks earlier, 3 weeks before Mitchell had called to say they were coming for Thanksgiving. I'd been sitting in this same kitchen, reading an old news article on my laptop, something I'd found while searching for information about Margaret's cancer treatment. The article was from Ohio, from a small newspaper in Lima. It was about an elderly man named George Patterson who died in what was initially ruled a suicide, but had been questioned by investigators. The article had mentioned his daughter-in-law, a woman named Victoria Chambers. That's when I'd first felt at that cold certainty that Margaret's warnings weren't paranoia or grief-induced imaginings. That's when I'd understood that the danger was real, and that it was still out there, still looking for victims. I'd called the sheriff's office that day. I'd asked to speak to whoever was investigating Victoria Chambers. They'd transferred me around 3 times before I reached Detective Sarah Mitchell. Sarah had listened to everything I'd told her without interrupting. She'd asked careful questions, and then she'd told me something that had confirmed every fear I'd harbored. "Mr. Ashford," she'd said, and I could hear the weight of years of investigation in those 2 words. "We've been monitoring Victoria Chambers for approximately 4 years. She's connected to the deaths of 3 elderly individuals in Ohio, all of whom were initially ruled accidental or suicides. But there were inconsistencies. Blood work showed substances that shouldn't have been there. Medication bottles showed signs of tampering. We've been building a case, but we don't have enough yet to arrest her." "What do you need?" I'd asked. "Evidence from Michigan," Sarah had said. "We need to place her at a crime scene. We need to catch her in the act. We need testimony and physical evidence that connects her to attempted poisoning in your state." That had been 3 weeks ago. The knock on my door at 6 in the morning was quiet but firm. I'd been expecting it. Detective Sarah Mitchell stood on my porch in the gray dawn light. She was taller than I'd expected, lean with dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. There was a kind of efficiency about her, the way she moved, the way her eyes took in the details of my front porch in a single glance. She was wearing an unmarked jacket and jeans, nothing that would mark her as law enforcement to a casual observer. "Mr. Ashford," she said, and I gestured for her to come inside quickly. We moved to my kitchen away from the windows, away from the sight of anyone who might be watching from the guest bedroom upstairs. Cody greeted Sarah with the kind of acceptance he usually reserved for people he trusted, which told me everything I needed to know about my dog's instincts. If Cody approved of Sarah Mitchell, then Sarah Mitchell was exactly what she claimed to be. "They're both still sleeping?" Sarah asked, setting down a small laptop and a briefcase on my kitchen table. "Sleeping heavily," I said. "I heard Mitchell snoring about an hour ago." "Good." Sarah pulled out a folder and opened it, revealing photographs and documents. "I wanted to brief you on what we know before we set up the surveillance, and I wanted to discuss the plan with you in person. What you're about to do takes courage, Mr. Ashford, and I need you to understand exactly what's happening." She showed me the Ohio files. 3 deaths, 3 elderly individuals, a woman named Dorothy Hendricks, a man named George Patterson, and another woman named Ruth Hartwell. All had connections to Victoria Chambers. All had died under suspicious circumstances. All had been ruled accidental or natural causes. "We found trace amounts of aconitine in Dorothy's system," Sarah said, pointing to a toxicology report. "Aconitine is a plant-based alkaloid. It's extremely lethal, and it's almost impossible to detect unless you know to look for it. Victoria obtained a quantity of aconitine approximately 7 years ago through an online pharmacy that was later shut down for selling prescription medications illegally." 7 years, I repeated. That's when Victoria likely poisoned your wife," Sarah finished quietly. "We can't prove it in court without her confession, but the timeline matches. The substances we found in your wife's system were consistent with aconitine and benzodiazepines. Victoria was learning, experimenting. By the time she got to Ohio, she'd perfected her methods." Sarah explained the plan with the precision of someone who'd done this before. She had 2 officers who would be stationed outside my house, hidden, but close. She had recording equipment that could be placed in my living room and dining room. She had a wire that she could fit me with if Diana became violent. She had a list of substances to watch for. Medications I should refuse, beverages I should decline. "Your role," Sarah said, looking directly at me, "is to be bait. You're going to let her think her plan is working. You're going to accept her offers of tea or coffee or food if you feel safe doing so. You're going to let her believe she has access to you. And you're going to give us the evidence we need to arrest her. What if she tries to poison me? I asked. Then we intervene, Sarah said simply. We're not going to let her succeed, but we need to catch her attempting it. We need to catch her administering substances. We need her confession if possible. We spent the next hour going over every detail. Sarah showed me how to use the recording device she'd bring. She explained where the cameras would be hidden. She told me which substances to watch for, which beverages to avoid, which actions would signal to the officers outside that they needed to come in. One more thing, Sarah said as she was packing up. We're not going to arrest her immediately. We're going to let this play out. We're going to wait for the right moment, probably during a meal. Or when she offers you something to drink. We want her on camera. We want her in the act. That way there's no ambiguity. That way a jury will know exactly what she was planning. How long? I asked. Days, Sarah said. Maybe less. Predators like Victoria are patient, but they're also impulsive. She won't be able to resist the opportunity for long. After Sarah left, I sat alone in my kitchen with Cody, and I understood finally what Margaret had been trying to tell me all those years. That danger doesn't always announce itself with violence or aggression. Sometimes danger arrives in a silk robe and a practiced smile. Sometimes danger offers you tea. And sometimes the only way to survive is to let danger think it's winning. The morning had taken on a quality of unreality, as if I were watching myself from outside my own body. Sarah moved through my house with the kind of quiet efficiency of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. She carried a small camera, no bigger than a coin, and she positioned it carefully on a high shelf in the kitchen, angled so that it would capture the entire counter where food was typically prepared. Another camera went into the living room. Concealed behind a framed photograph on the mantel, a picture of Margaret and me from years ago, from before everything had changed. These are high definition, Sarah said quietly, speaking barely above a whisper, even though Mitchell and Diana were still asleep upstairs. They're motion activated and they have night vision. Whatever happens in these rooms, we'll see it. I watched her work with a kind of fascination. This was what law enforcement looked like, when it was done carefully, methodically, with the full weight of investigation and procedure behind it. This was what justice looked like in motion. Sarah pulled out a small device, no larger than a pack of cigarettes. This is your wire, she said, and she showed me how to position it in my shirt pocket, how to make sure it was secure, how to activate the recording function with a simple gesture. Once this is on, everything you say, and everything anyone says to you, will be transmitted to my receiver and recorded. You won't feel it. You won't remember it's there, but it will capture everything. I held the device in my hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settle into my palm. Sarah led me into my bedroom, and I realized then that she wasn't leaving the house at all. She was positioned in the back bedroom, the spare room we rarely used, the one with the window that overlooked the side yard. There was a small monitor on the dresser, and when Sarah switched it on, I could see both cameras on the screen simultaneously. The kitchen, the living room, two angles on the place where Diana would almost certainly make her move. I'll be able to see and hear everything from here, Sarah said, pointing to a small earpiece she'd installed. The moment Diana tries anything, the moment I see her administering a substance or hear her confessing, I'll give the signal. Officers Mills and Torres are outside in an unmarked vehicle parked about 50 yards down the road, concealed by the tree line. They can be here in less than 30 seconds if needed. What if she doesn't try anything? I asked. She will, Sarah said with absolute certainty. Predators like Victoria don't come all the way to Michigan without a plan. She'll try today. Maybe at lunch, maybe at dinner, but she'll try. We walked back through the house and Sarah showed me the recording device one more time, making sure I understood how to activate it. Making sure I understood that every moment of this day was going to be documented, preserved, turned into evidence. The most important thing, Sarah said looking directly at me, is that you stay calm, you stay normal, you act like you don't know anything. You accept what she offers within reason. If she brings you a cup of tea and it smells normal, you can accept it. Smell it first. Always smell it first. If something seems off, refuse it. That's your signal to us. Then I nodded. My mouth was dry. And Mr. Ashford, Sarah said, and I turned to look at her. Don't be brave. Don't try to confront her. Don't try to get a confession out of her on your own. Your job is to stay alive and let us do our job. Understood. Understood, I said. By 9 in the morning, the house was ready. The cameras were live. The recording device was positioned and tested. Sarah was stationed in the back bedroom with her monitors and her earpiece. The officers outside were in position waiting. Everything was prepared. Everything was waiting for Diana to make her move. I went downstairs to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee from the pot I'd prepared hours earlier. The house felt different now, not safer, but monitored, observed, like the walls themselves had eyes. Cody stayed close to me, his instincts apparently telling him that something significant was about to happen. I ran my hand along his back, drawing comfort from his solid presence. If everything went wrong today, at least I had Cody. At least I had the memory of Margaret. At least I had the knowledge that I was fighting back. Mitchell came downstairs around 10, looking bleary-eyed and confused, asking if there was coffee. I made him a cup without any additions, and he drank it while scrolling through his phone, seemingly oblivious to the fact that his wife was a potential serial killer, and that his father had just turned their house into an active crime scene investigation. It was around noon when Diana emerged from upstairs. She was dressed in another perfectly curated outfit. White linen pants, a cream-colored sweater, her hair already done, her makeup already applied. She looked like a photograph from a luxury magazine. She looked like danger wearing a human face. "Good morning, Dad," she said, and the use of that word dad sent a chill through me. I thought I'd prepare something special for lunch, something nutritious and delicious. "That sounds nice," I said, and I could hear the calmness in my own voice, could feel the performance of normalcy settling over me like armor. But as she moved toward the kitchen window, Diana paused. She looked out at the driveway. She looked at the tree line. And for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face, a recognition, perhaps, or a suspicion. "Is that a police vehicle?" she asked, her voice still sweet, but with an edge underneath that hadn't been there before. My heart rate spiked. In my earpiece, I heard nothing. Sarah was watching, waiting. "Just the neighborhood patrol," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They do regular rounds. You don't have to worry about anything." Diana turned away from the window, and when she looked back at me, her smile had returned. But it was different now. It was thinner, less convincing. "Of course," she said, "just the patrol." But I could see in her eyes that she knew. Somehow she knew, and she was deciding what to do about it. Diana had been in the shower for 7 minutes when Sarah's voice came through my earpiece, calm and professional. "Window of opportunity. Make it count, Mr. Ashford." The water continued to run upstairs, and I could hear the faint sound of the shower head hitting the tile. Mitchell was downstairs in the guest bedroom, working on his laptop earbuds and completely oblivious to what was happening. The moment stretched before me like an open door, and I knew I couldn't waste it. I moved through the house quickly but carefully. Sarah had warned me about this, the impulse to rush to panic, to make mistakes because of adrenaline and fear. I'd learned in the past few hours that careful was better than fast. Careful was how you didn't leave evidence behind. Careful was how you didn't tip your hand to a woman who was planning to poison you. The master bedroom door closed softly behind me. The room smelled like Diana's expensive perfume, that cloying, aggressive scent that seemed to fill every space she occupied. Her belongings were organized with the same fastidious precision I'd noticed before. Her suitcase sat on the luggage rack, nearly arranged with clothes folded in the perfect rectangles. Her toiletries were lined up on the dresser like a display in a department store window. Expensive face creams, serums, masks, all the tools of someone who understood that appearance was a weapon. Everything in its place, everything controlled, everything calculated. I went directly to the bed, the side where Diana slept. Under the pillow, my hand found something that hadn't been there before, something flat, something rectangular, something that didn't belong in the life Diana was pretending to live. A phone. Not the sleek modern smartphone she carried in her designer purse. Not the phone Mitchell thought she used. This was different, older. A basic model from 5 years ago. The kind you could buy at a convenience store without showing ID. The kind that didn't require you to register it to your name. The kind that existed specifically to hide conversations. A burner phone. My hands trembled as I powered it on. The screen came to life with a dull glow, and I saw the message counter at the top, 247 unread messages. 247. The most recent conversation thread was with a single contact, a name entered simply as Amber. I started scrolling, my eyes racing through the messages, trying to absorb everything while the shower continued to run upstairs. The conversations went back weeks, no months. There was a rhythm to the exchanges, a familiarity that spoke of careful coordination. These weren't two people making plans on the fly. These were two people executing a long-term operation. The most recent messages were from 3 hours ago. Is the father ready? Such from Amber. Diana's response. Getting there. He's suspicious now, but that doesn't matter. The window is closing fast. I need to move to phase 2. Phase 2. The vitamin worked, Amber asked. Enough to weaken him. The second dose will finish it. Once he's gone, Ash will be easier. The boy won't know what hit him. Ash. Mitchell's childhood nickname. The one Margaret and I had called him when he was small. The one nobody outside the family should have known. This woman, this Amber, knew my family's private history. She knew my son's childhood names. She knew their plans extended beyond me to Mitchell. I scrolled further back, my stomach twisting with each message I read. Well, how many times have you done this? Diana had asked weeks earlier. This will be my 4th, maybe 5th. I've lost count, honestly. The method works perfectly. No one suspects. Old people die all the time, and when they do, people accept it. 4th, maybe 5th. Have you thought about the next one after the father? Amber asked in another exchange from 2 weeks ago. The boy, Mitchell. He's weak. He'll be easy to control once the father is gone. And he has money, significant money from his work. Once he's out of the way, the estate passes to me. Yeah, I've already positioned myself as the grieving widow. The estate, as she was planning to inherit. She'd orchestrated this entire marriage, this entire infiltration of our family, with the goal of poisoning both Mitchell and me, and then claiming whatever inheritance she could find. I photographed every message. My hands shook as I held the phone up to capture each conversation thread. I worked methodically, going back through weeks of correspondence. There were references to other names: Ruth Hartwell in Ohio, Dorothy Hendricks, George Patterson. These were the names from Ohio. These were the victims Sarah had told me about. There was a message from Amber from a month ago. The Hartwell situation is resolved. Clean. No investigation. You were right about the aconitine. Perfect poison. Undetectable if you know where to look. And most coroners don't. Victoria. That was what Amber called her real name. Victoria Chambers. Another message from just last week. I have new clients. 3 of them. All elderly. All with significant assets. We're going to make a lot of money doing this, V. This is our real calling. New clients, as if they were running a business. As if the systematic poisoning of elderly people was a legitimate enterprise. I heard the shower upstairs begin to wind down. The sound changed from a steady drumming to a softer patter. Diana would be out in moments. I worked faster, photographing the final messages, the ones that made the entire conspiracy clear. After the Michigan targets, what's next? Diana had asked. I'm thinking about expanding west. California has a lot of wealthy elderly people. No one knows us there. We could disappear for months, take multiple targets, and then move on. We could do this for years. 5 years of targets, years of money, years of targets. I powered down the phone and slid it back under the pillow exactly as I'd found it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I moved toward the door just as I heard the shower curtain open upstairs. In my kitchen with trembling fingers, I opened the encrypted messaging app that Sarah had set up for me. One by one, I began uploading the photographs to the secure file. The messages appeared on my phone, evidence of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond what I'd imagined. This wasn't just about Margaret. This wasn't just about me. This was a national operation. This was 2 women or more running a systematic poisoning enterprise across multiple states. Sarah's response came within 30 seconds. Amber Hartwell. FBI has been tracking her for 18 months. She's connected to at least 5 confirmed deaths across 3 states. There may be more. This is bigger than we thought. Forward everything to the FBI immediately. Do not deviate from the plan. Let Diana attempt whatever she's planning. We need her on video, on audio confessing. I stared at the message. 5 deaths. 3 states. An operation that had been running for years, killing people methodically, carefully, without raising suspicion. And Margaret had been one of their victims. Just another name on a list of targets. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Diana was coming down, and my entire body went rigid with the knowledge of what she was. Not just a woman who had poisoned my wife. A professional. An operator. Part of a network of killers who treated human death like a business transaction. Diana appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later. Her hair was wet and curled beautifully, her skin flushed from the heat of the shower. She'd changed into a fresh outfit, a pale blue cashmere sweater, and cream-colored pants that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was smiling. "Well," she said, walking toward me with that practiced grace, "I was thinking we should prepare something special for dinner tonight. Something really memorable. Something that will make you feel absolutely wonderful afterward." She placed her hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the coolness of her rings through my shirt. "I'm something you'll never forget," she said, and her smile widened into something that looked almost predatory. Through the kitchen window, I could see the unmarked vehicle still parked in the distance. Sarah was watching. The officers were ready. And in my pocket, the recording device was capturing every word, every gesture, every calculated movement of this woman who had murdered my wife and was now standing in my kitchen, planning my death. Before we continue, just a quick note. Some parts of this story have been adapted for storytelling purposes and may not fully reflect real events. If you're enjoying this video, consider sharing it and subscribing so you don't miss the next stories. And if this isn't for you, you're always free to stop here. The laptop was still on the desk in the corner of the guest bedroom, and Diana had left it open, careless. Or perhaps she'd simply assumed that no one would be bold enough to search her belongings while she was still in the house. Perhaps she'd grown so comfortable in her assumed superiority, her position of control, that she didn't think anyone could touch her. I sat down at the desk and opened the browser history. What I found made my entire body go cold. The search terms were systematic, methodical. They dated back months, sometimes years. There were searches for aconitine online pharmacy, where to buy benzodiazepines, undetectable poisons, plant-based alkaloids elderly. Each search had been followed by clicks to various pharmaceutical websites, some legitimate, most clearly operating in the gray areas of internet regulation. I pulled up the purchase history, and what I saw confirmed everything. There was an order from 4 weeks ago, right before Mitch and Diana announced their visit for Thanksgiving. The order was for aconitine, plant extract pharmaceutical grade. The order confirmation showed it had been shipped to a P.O. box in Portage, Michigan. The date of purchase was August 23rd. I opened my phone and checked Margaret's diary. She'd first noted Diana's suspicious behavior in her entries, dated March 2018. But there was another set of entries from 7 years ago, around the time of Margaret's death in October 2018. I cross-referenced the timeline. Aconitine purchased August 23rd, 2025. Mitch and Diana announced the visit August 27th, 2025. Expected arrival, November Thanksgiving. That meant Diana had ordered the poison specifically for this visit. She'd known she was coming here. She'd planned it down to the smallest detail. There was another order from 6 weeks before that, benzodiazepines, prescription-strength sedatives. The order had been filled by an online pharmacy operating out of Panama, with no legitimate verification of prescription. The shipping address was the same P.O. box. Then I found the emails. Diana's email account was still logged in, and in her inbox, I found a thread that made my hands start shaking so badly I could barely navigate the trackpad. The sender was listed as Amber H. The address was amber.hartwell.cleveland@gmail.com, Cleveland, Ohio. The emails dated back over a year, and they told a story of systematic coordination, careful planning, and murder treated like a business operation. The most recent email was from 3 days ago. I've been thinking about your situation in Michigan. The father is perfect, old, alone, isolated, and the son is weak, exactly the type that responds well to a strong woman's influence. My method has worked 4 times now, without a single raised eyebrow. Absolutely perfect. The first dose will weaken him. By the 3rd, he'll be gone, and the doctors will have no idea what caused it. Trust me on this. I've perfected it. 4 times. Amber had now claimed 4 kills. Not 5, not 3-4 separate murders that she was describing with the confidence of someone who'd gotten away with it repeatedly. I scrolled further back. There was an email from 6 months ago where Amber described her methods in detail. The key is consistency, Amber had written. Small doses over an extended period, not enough to trigger immediate symptoms, just enough to weaken the immune system. Accelerate any existing conditions, create the appearance of natural decline. With elderly targets, it's almost foolproof. Their families expect decline. The doctors expect decline. Nobody looks for murder when the victim is already dying of something else. And then in an email from just 2 weeks ago, I heard about your husband's mother. Such a tragedy. But you know what you did perfect. The timing was impeccable. The medical examiner never suspected a thing. And the son Mitchell right. He believes his mother died of cancer. He'll never know the truth. That's the beauty of this. The perfect crime is one nobody even knows is a crime. She was talking about Margaret. Amber was congratulating Diana on successfully poisoning my wife, on the perfect murder of a woman who had done nothing to deserve it except grow old and become vulnerable. There was another email that made me feel physically ill. After you finish with the father in Michigan, we should talk about your son. I have a feeling he could be very lucrative. Wealthy men his age often have significant assets, and they're usually easily manipulated by the right woman. One poison carefully administered, and the wife inherits everything. Then she disappears, takes another identity, finds another target. We could do this indefinitely 5. We could build an empire of poisoners, an empire of calculated murders. Amber and Diana weren't lone predators. They were architects of a systematic, methodical operation designed to extract wealth from families by murdering their elderly members. I photographed every email, every purchase confirmation, every order history. My hands moved mechanically, documenting evidence that would be admissible in court, that would put both of these women away for life, or longer. I heard footsteps in the hallway, Diana moving through the house, probably preparing that dinner she'd mentioned, the one that would be something special, the one that would finish what the vitamin had started. I closed the laptop and pocketed my phone. In the encrypted messaging app, I uploaded every photograph, every email screenshot, every purchase confirmation. Sarah's response came almost immediately, and the message was simple. We have sufficient evidence for an arrest warrant. Judge has approved. Officers will move in at dinner time, approximately 7 p.m. When Diana attempts to administer anything to you, when she tries to poison you, that's when we move. Stay calm, stay safe. Tonight, this ends. Tonight, this ends. I looked at my phone at the time, 4:47 p.m. 2 hours and 13 minutes until Sarah and her officers would come through my doors. 2 hours and 13 minutes until Diana would finally be exposed, until Amber's network would begin to unravel. 2 hours and 13 minutes until Margaret's murder would finally receive justice. I walked downstairs to the kitchen where Diana was arranging ingredients on the counter. She looked up at me with that smile, the predatory one I'd learned to recognize. The smile of someone who thought they had already won. Dinner will be ready soon. Dad, she said, I prepared something very special, a family recipe. I think you're going to love it. I forced myself to smile back to play the role of unsuspecting victim a little while longer. I'm sure I will, I said, but Sarah was listening. The cameras were recording, and in just over 2 hours this was all going to end. The earbuds fit snugly in my ears, and I pressed play on the encrypted app Sarah had set up for me. The recording dated from 2 days earlier, Thursday morning, when Mitchell and Diana had gone out to the market, leaving me supposedly alone in the house. They hadn't known that the listening device I'd inserted into a potted plant in their bedroom was capturing every word. The audio crackled for a moment, then I heard voices. Mitchell's voice first, uncertain, hesitant. Diana, I've been thinking about what you said, about Dad's will, about how that he needs to change things. But what you're suggesting... Diana's voice came next, and it was smooth as silk, dangerous as a blade. What I'm suggesting is that we protect ourselves, Mitch. Your father is old, he's lonely. He's not thinking clearly. We're simply helping him make the right decision about his legacy. By poisoning him, Mitchell asked, and his voice cracked slightly on the word. There was a pause. I could almost hear Diana's smile through the recording. Not poisoning, Diana said carefully. We're simply accelerating a natural process. Your father is 72 years old. He has no one. He's already fragile. We're just helping things along. That's murder, Mitchell said. And there was something in his voice, a kind of desperate hope that she would deny it, that he would wake up from this nightmare. Diana, that's literally murder. It's inheritance, Diana corrected, and her voice had taken on an edge, now something cold and cutting. It's your birthright. It's what should be yours anyway. All we're doing is moving up the timeline. Your father was going to die eventually. We're simply making sure that when he does, his assets pass to you instead of to some distant relative or charity he hasn't even named. But he's... Mitchell started, and his voice was small, now desperate. He's my father, Diana. I know that, Diana said. and there was a softness to her voice that was somehow more terrifying than the coldness. "And I also know that you married me. You knew what this was. You knew what we were doing when you signed those papers. You knew Mitch." The recording cut to another moment, perhaps minutes later. How long, Mitchell was asking now, and his voice had taken on a quality of resignation. Not acceptance, but surrender. The surrender of someone who'd already lost the argument before it even began. 2 weeks, Diana said. Maybe 3. The poison works slowly. It mimics natural decline. His doctors will think his cancer is returning. His friends will think he's depressed. Everyone will have a reason for why he's fading. And then he'll be gone, and you'll inherit everything, and we'll finally be free. Free, Mitchell repeated, and there was so much pain in that one word that I had to pause the recording. I sat with my hands trembling, understanding finally what had happened. Mitch wasn't a willing accomplice to murder. He was a man caught between love for his father and fear of his wife. He was a pawn in Diana's game, manipulated and trapped, forced to choose between his conscience and his marriage. But he'd chosen his marriage. He'd agreed to this, even if reluctantly, even if desperately. He'd allowed his wife to poison his father in exchange for an inheritance he probably didn't even want. I pressed play again. "After your father," Diana was saying in a new segment of the recording, "we'll have time to reassess. We'll have resources. We'll have options. Maybe we won't stay in Michigan. Maybe we'll move. Start fresh. Build something new." "And what about my mother?" Mitchell asked. "What about her cancer? Was that—" The recording cut off abruptly. There was silence. Then Diana's voice returned quieter, now more dangerous. "Your mother was already dying, Mitch. I simply helped her along. She was suffering. I accelerated her peace. You should think of it as mercy. Mercy. She called the systematic poisoning of my wife, his mother, mercy." I stopped the recording there. My hands were shaking too badly to continue. I understood now what Twist 11 meant. Mitchell wasn't innocent, but he was a victim. He hadn't come to Michigan planning to help murder his father. He'd come because his wife had manipulated him, lied to him, trapped him in a web of complicity that he couldn't escape without destroying his own life. Diana had orchestrated it all. The marriage, the manipulation, the slow corruption of a decent man into an accomplice to murder. She'd turned Mitchell into a weapon against himself. I heard footsteps on the stairs, quick light footsteps. Diana was coming down. I pulled out the earbuds and set my phone on the counter, trying to arrange my face into something resembling calm. Through the kitchen window, I could see the unmarked vehicle still positioned in the distance. Sarah was watching. The officers were waiting. Diana appeared in the kitchen doorway, and she was radiant. Her hair was freshly curled, her makeup immaculate, her clothing perfectly chosen. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and she looked like a woman who was about to celebrate. "Well, Dad," she said, moving toward the kitchen with that practiced grace, "I've been thinking about dinner all day. I want to make something truly memorable, something that will be absolutely unforgettable." She placed her hands on the counter near the sink, and I noticed she was wearing latex gloves. Not the kind you use for dishes, the kind you use when you don't want to leave fingerprints. "Something that will change everything," she continued, and her smile was radiant, predatory, completely honest about what she was about to do. "Don't you think that sounds wonderful?" My blood felt like ice in my veins. She had no idea that I'd heard her confession. She had no idea that I'd recorded her admission of Margaret's murder. She had no idea that in less than 3 hours, Sarah would be kicking down my front door with an arrest warrant. All she knew was that she was about to poison her father-in-law, and that nobody would ever suspect a thing. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, with my earbuds around my neck, when I heard the sound of something breaking upstairs. A crash, quick and violent, followed by silence so complete that it felt dangerous. Before I could move, Mitchell's footsteps thundered down the stairs. Not the measured pace of someone going about their day, but the frantic steps of someone running from something. His face when he appeared in the kitchen doorway was white, absolutely drained of color. His eyes were wild, and his hands were shaking so badly that I could see it from across the room. "Dad," he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, He didn't finish. He just stood there holding something in his hand, something small and rectangular that I recognized immediately. The burner phone. The one I'd found under Diana's pillow. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew. I already understood what had happened. "I was looking for—" Mitchell started, then stopped. His voice was thick as if he were speaking through tears. "I found this, under her pillow. I found this and I... He opened the phone, and even from across the room I could see the messages glowing on the screen. The conversation between Diana and Amber, the one about Ash and the plan to poison everyone in this house. Mitchell's hands were shaking so badly that he nearly dropped the phone. "That's my nickname," he said, and his voice had taken on a quality of hollow shock. "When I was a kid, that was what everyone called me. Ash. Only family knew that. Only people who loved me knew that." He looked at me, and there was something broken in his expression. "Why would she use that to describe me?" he asked. "Why would she be talking about me like I'm something to be managed, like I'm a problem?" I wanted to tell him then. I wanted to play him the recordings I'd made, to show him the emails, to let him see the full scope of his wife's betrayal. But something in his face told me he was about to discover it himself. He was already putting the pieces together. We heard footsteps on the stairs, Diana coming down, probably wondering why Mitchell had run out of their bedroom so suddenly. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, still dressed in her burgundy dress, still perfect, still controlled. But when she saw the burner phone in Mitchell's hands, something flickered across her face. For just an instant, the mask slipped. "Where did you find that?" she asked, and her voice had lost its sweetness entirely. It was flat, cold, professional. "Under your pillow," Mitchell said, and I could hear the hurt and confusion in his voice. "Diana, what is this? Who is Amber? What are these messages?" Diana stepped into the kitchen, and as I watched, she underwent a transformation. Her shoulders relaxed, her expression shifted. The smile that appeared on her face was nothing like the practiced sweetness she'd been showing us. This smile was genuine. It was the smile of someone who decided to stop pretending. "You want to know the truth?" Diana asked, and she was almost laughing now. "You actually want to know?" She pulled out a chair and sat down at the table, with us composed and collected, as if she were about to discuss something completely mundane. "I married you because you have money," she said flatly to Mitchell. "I married you because you're weak, because you're easily manipulated, because your father was old and lonely and had assets that could be liquidated. That's the truth. That's always been the truth." Mitchell made a sound something between a gasp and a sob. "Your father has approximately $500,000 in savings." Diana continued, her voice clinical and precise. "He has life insurance policies totaling another $500,000. He has a house worth roughly $400,000. That's $1.4 million just sitting here, waiting to be inherited by someone. It might as well be us." "You're talking about killing him," Mitchell said, and it wasn't a question. He'd finally said it out loud. He'd finally acknowledged what he'd been denying since the beginning. "I'm talking about accelerating the inevitable," Diana corrected. "Your father is 72 years old. He's fragile. He's alone. He won't live another 10 years anyway. Why should we wait off in the upper there?" "Because he's a person," Mitchell shouted, and his voice cracked. "Because he's my father." "Diana, this is insane. This is murder." "Yes," Diana said, and she said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it was almost worse than if she'd screamed it. "It is, and you agreed to it. You knew what this was when you married me." "I didn't..." Mitchell was standing now, backing away from her. "I didn't know you were going to... I thought we were just going to..." He couldn't finish. He couldn't even articulate what he'd thought they were going to do. "What?" Diana asked. "Just what exactly did you think we were going to do? Mitch convinced your father to change his will. Ask nicely. Your father loves you. But he's not going to give you everything. He's going to keep that house. He's going to keep that money. The only way to get what's ours is to take it." "We're not owed anything," Mitchell shouted, and there were tears streaming down his face now. "We're his family, not..." "Not what?" Diana asked, standing up to face him. "Not criminals too late for that. You're complicit now, Mitch. You're part of this. You're as guilty as I am." That was when Mitchell asked the question that broke something in the room. "What did you do to my mother?" The silence was absolute. Diana's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. She was deciding whether to lie or to tell the truth. And whatever she decided, it was going to destroy Mitchell completely. "Your mother was already dying," Diana said, and her voice had taken on that clinical tone again. "She was in pain. She was suffering. I simply accelerated her death. I helped her." "You poisoned her," Mitchell whispered. "Yes," Diana said. "I did, and I did it well. The doctors never suspected a thing. She died thinking she had cancer, and nobody knew that I'd helped her along. It was merciful, actually. She didn't have to suffer anymore. Mitchell made a sound that I'd never heard a human make before, something between a cry and a scream. Something that contained all the pain and betrayal and horror of finally understanding that the woman he'd married had murdered his mother. He stumbled backward, his hand finding the counter. For a moment, I thought he might collapse entirely, but instead, something shifted in him. Some kind of survival instinct took over. "I'm calling the police," he said, and his voice was steady now, hollow but steady. "No, you're not," Diana said calmly, and she reached into the pocket of her burgundy dress. But before she could pull out whatever she was reaching for, Mitchell ran. He ran past her toward the kitchen door. He ran out of the kitchen and through the living room, his eyes wild with panic and grief. And he ran straight toward me. "Dad," he said, collapsing against the counter beside where I was sitting. "Dad, she killed Mom. She's going to kill you. She's going to kill us both." I pulled my son into an embrace, and I held him, while he broke apart in my arms, finally understanding the full horror of what his wife really was. The kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of herbs as Diana worked with meticulous precision. She'd changed into a fresh apron, cream-colored, pristine, and she moved through the space with an almost ritualistic grace. Every action was deliberate. Every gesture was controlled. She was preparing for something. I watched from the living room doorway, Cody pressed against my leg. My dog hadn't left my side since Mitch had come down and collapsed in that chair across from me. Cody's senses were heightened, his entire body taut with awareness. He could feel it too. The wrongness in the air, the predatory intent that Diana was barely concealing beneath her calm, professional demeanor. Diana moved to the stove and began stirring a pot of soup. The broth was a deep golden color, rich and fragrant. She'd added vegetables, carrots, celery, onions, and the smell of it would have been appetizing if I didn't know exactly what else was in that pot. "Dinner will be ready in about 15 minutes, Diana called out from the kitchen, her voice bright and cheerful, as if nothing had changed, as if Mitch hadn't just discovered her burner phone, as if the mask hadn't come completely off. She was acting, still performing, still trying to maintain the illusion that this was just a normal evening, just a normal family dinner. Mitch sat rigidly in the chair across from me, his face the color of old paper. He hadn't spoken since he'd run downstairs and thrown himself into my arms. He just sat there, staring at nothing, his hands occasionally trembling in his lap. He was watching Diana work, watching every movement, every gesture, understanding now what those movements meant. He was watching his wife prepare to poison his father. I reached down and ran my hand along Cody's back. My dog was vibrating with tension, his breathing shallow and rapid. Whatever Diana was adding to that soup, whatever chemical compound she'd so carefully mixed into, that broth, Cody could smell it. His senses were screaming at him that danger was present, that toxins were being prepared, that his beloved human was about to be served something designed to end his life. Diana emerged from the kitchen carrying a large ceramic bowl. The soup looked beautiful, rustic, homemade. Exactly the kind of thing you'd expect from a woman trying to care for her aging father-in-law. She set it down on the dining table with careful ceremony, then returned to the kitchen. "This is an old family recipe," Diana said, as she came back with ladles and bowls. "From Ohio. My grandmother made this for special occasions. I thought tonight deserved something special." Special. She kept using that word. Special dinner, special occasion, special recipe. As if poisoning someone was something to be celebrated. I've perfected it over the years. Diana continued ladling soup into a bowl, with movements that were almost artistic in their precision. Made some adjustments to the base ingredients. Added some herbs that enhanced the flavor. I think you're going to find it absolutely transformative. Transformative. That was one way to describe slow poisoning. She set the bowl of soup in front of me, with a smile that was utterly devoid of warmth. Then she moved to the kitchen again and returned with a teapot. The tea inside was a deep amber color, steaming gently, releasing a faint herbal aroma. "And after the soup," Diana said, settling into a chair across from me, as if she were about to enjoy a meal herself, though I noticed she didn't serve herself any soup. "I've prepared a special tea. It's very restorative, perfect for a gentleman your age. The herbs are very specific, very effective at supporting overall health and vitality." She poured a cup of tea with deliberate care, the steam rising from the delicate china. She set it beside my soup bowl and looked at me with those cold, empty eyes. "Go ahead, Dad," she said, and the word dad sounded like a curse in her mouth. Eat, drink. I made this with all my love. All her love. The same love that had killed Margaret. The same love that had poisoned an elderly woman in Ohio. The same love that was now sitting across from me, watching to see if I would take the bait. I looked down at the soup. I could see the vegetables floating in the golden broth, could see the steam rising from the surface. It looked so normal, so innocent, so safe. But Cody was going crazy. My dog had moved to his feet, his entire body trembling. His usual quiet alertness had transformed into something more urgent, more desperate. He was making small whimpering sounds, not the casual whimpers of a hungry dog begging for food, but distressed sounds. Sounds of warning. Sounds of absolute panic. "What's wrong with your dog?" Diana asked, her voice tight with annoyance. "He's sensitive to certain smells," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Herbs sometimes upset his stomach. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that made sense. Diana accepted it with a small nod, returning her gaze to me with those predatory eyes. I reached slowly toward the cup of tea. My hand was steady. Years of controlling my emotions had taught me how to do that, but internally I was vibrating with adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment. In my earpiece I could hear nothing. Sarah was silent, waiting for the signal. The officers outside were watching. The cameras were recording. Diana leaned forward slightly, her entire body radiating anticipation. I lifted the teacup toward my lips. Cody let out a sound I'd never heard him make before, a sharp, desperate bark that cut through the quiet of the evening like a knife. It was a warning, a cry of absolute alarm, a plea for me to stop, to understand, to recognize the danger that was right in front of me. His entire body was shaking. His eyes were fixed on the cup in my hand. He knew exactly what that tea contained. He'd smelled it the moment Diana had prepared it, and now he was desperately trying to communicate what he knew. Diana's eyes narrowed. She was watching me, watching the cup, watching Cody, watching to see what I would do. Mitch was standing now, his hands clenched into fists, his entire body rigid with the effort of not moving, not acting, not giving away that he knew what was happening. The soup steamed in its bowl. The tea steamed in its cup. And somewhere out in the darkness beyond my house, Detective Sarah Mitchell was listening to every word, watching every movement, waiting for the moment when Diana would commit her final act. The moment stretched crystalline and perfect. Diana was still leaning forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the cup of tea in front of me. She was waiting to see if I would drink, waiting to see if her poison would work, waiting to see me die. I set down the cup very carefully. Then I looked directly into her eyes, and I spoke clearly, each word distinct and deliberate. "Diana," I said, or perhaps I should call you by your real name, Victoria Chambers. The color drained from her face so completely that for a moment I thought she might collapse. She went white, not pale, not flushed, but a pure absolute white that spoke of complete and utter shock. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, and her voice had taken on a brittle quality like glass about to shatter. "I know everything." I continued, my voice steady and calm. "I know about Ohio. I know about Amber Hartwell. I know about the Aconitine. I know about Margaret. I know about Ruth Hartwell, Dorothy Hendricks, George Patterson. I know about the emails. I know about the burner phone. I know about every single thing you've done." Diana stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward, clattering to the floor. "You've been investigating me," she demanded, her voice rising, now the careful control slipping away. "You've been, how dare you? How dare you violate my privacy like... Endoist, endoco istao. The police have been investigating you," I said calmly. "For 18 months from Ohio. The FBI is involved. Detective Sarah Mitchell has been listening to everything, every word, every confession." Diana's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the cameras I knew were hidden there. Then her eyes snapped to Mitch. "You told him," she hissed. "You went to your father and told him everything." Mitch stood up from his chair, and for the first time since his discovery in the bedroom, he looked like something other than a ghost. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't tell him. I found the phone myself. I read the messages myself. And I told Dad because he deserved to know that his daughter-in-law is a serial killer." The word hung in the air between them. Serial killer. The truth stated plainly without euphemism or softening. Diana's hand shot out toward the cup of tea. She was trying to grab it to destroy the evidence, to erase the proof of what she'd been about to do. I stood up in one fluid motion, and I took the cup and poured it directly onto the kitchen floor. The liquid splashed across the tiles, a deep amber color, and as it spread, something else spread with it. A smell. Chemical. Bitter. Sharp. The unmistakable scent of whatever poison she'd so carefully prepared. The smell of aconitine and benzodiazepines and whatever else she'd mixed into that lethal brew. The smell filled the entire kitchen, undeniable and damning. Cody, who had been trembling and whimpering just moments before, suddenly went quiet. Completely still. He knew. Somehow he understood that the danger had passed, that I had made the choice to live, that I had rejected the poison that was meant for me. He pressed against my leg, calm and present. "It's over," I said simply, and then the world exploded into action. The front door burst open so violently that it slammed against the wall. The back door opened simultaneously. Officers Mills and Torres came through one entrance, while Detective Sarah Mitchell came through the other, her weapon drawn, her eyes sharp and professional. "Victoria Chambers," Sarah said, her voice ringing with authority and finality. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit multiple homicides across state lines. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Diana didn't resist. She didn't run. She didn't try to fight. She simply stood there in the center of my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her crimes. And she stared at me with an expression of pure, undiluted hatred. It was a look that said, "You thought you were smart. You thought you could beat me, but you were always going to lose." And maybe she was right. Maybe I had always been going to lose. Maybe the only reason I'd survived was because of people like Sarah Mitchell, because of the recordings and the evidence and the cameras hidden throughout my house. Maybe I'd survived because Margaret had been brave enough to warn me even from beyond the grave. And maybe I'd survived because of Cody. Officer Torres moved forward and placed handcuffs on Diana's wrists with professional efficiency. She didn't struggle. She simply allowed it to happen, her eyes never leaving mine. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice low and threatening. "You think this is over? This is just the beginning. I have lawyers. I have resources. You have nothing," Sarah said calmly. "We have recordings of you confessing to poisoning Margaret Ashford. We have emails detailing your plans to poison Robert Ashford. We have video evidence of you preparing poisoned food. We have testimony from your accomplice Amber Hartwell, who has agreed to cooperate with federal authorities in exchange for leniency. We have 5 bodies in Ohio, all with forensic evidence linking them to your methods. And we have this." She gestured to the spilled tea on the kitchen floor, where forensic technicians were already photographing and documenting the chemical residue. "You're finished, Victoria," Sarah said, and there was something almost kind in her voice, something that suggested she understood that Victoria Chambers, the real name, the real woman beneath the mask, had finally met someone she couldn't manipulate, couldn't control, couldn't poison her way out of. Officer Mills led Diana toward the door. She went without struggling, without fighting, without any of the dramatic resistance that movies had taught me to expect. She simply walked, her wrists bound, her face a mask of cold hatred. But as she reached the doorway, she turned back and looked at me one final time. "Your wife suffered," she said quietly. "Every poison I gave her made her suffer more, and she never knew why. She died confused and in pain, and there was nothing she could do to stop it." The words hit me like a physical blow. But before I could respond, before I could do anything but stand there with Cody pressed against my leg, Sarah stepped in front of Diana and guided her out of the house. The door closed behind them. And then there was silence, absolute complete silence. Mitch was still standing by his chair, his hands hanging at his sides. His face was streaked with tears. He looked at me, and I saw in his expression the full weight of what had happened, the betrayal, the manipulation, the discovery that the woman he'd married had orchestrated the slow, careful poisoning of his mother. I crossed the room and pulled my son into my arms. "It's over," I said again, and this time I meant it. Sarah Mitchell's voice was calm and professional as she read Diana her rights, the words a familiar ritual that had been performed hundreds of thousands of times before in rooms just like this one. Her hand rested on Diana's shoulder, not unkindly, but with the firm authority of someone who'd done this many times before. "You have the right to remain silent," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of law enforcement authority. "Anything you say can and will be used as evidence against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand your rights?" Diana didn't answer. She simply stared at me with those cold, empty eyes as Officer Mills guided her toward the front door. The handcuffs caught the light as she walked, silver gleaming against her wrists like some kind of dark jewelry. But just before she disappeared into the darkness of the evening, she turned her head and looked back at me one final time. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, her voice carrying a threat that made my blood run cold. "You'll regret every moment of this." I said nothing. I simply watched her leave Mitch standing beside me, both of us silent in the aftermath of the confrontation. The silence between us felt heavy, weighted with everything that had happened and everything we'd have to process in the days to come. The police station that night was a blur of activity. Officers were processing the scene at my house, photographing the spilled tea, collecting the broken cup, documenting everything that would eventually become evidence in court. But I wasn't thinking about the house. I was thinking about what came next. I was thinking about justice. I was thinking about Margaret. That's when the FBI agent walked in. Special Agent Marcus Pierce was a tall man in his early 40s, with the kind of bearing that suggested he'd spent 2 decades in law enforcement. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a nod, then settled into the chair across from me in the small interview room where Sarah had brought me. "Mr. Ashford," he said, opening a thick folder filled with documents, photographs, and handwritten notes. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Pierce with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been coordinating with Detective Mitchell on the Victoria Chambers investigation for the past 18 months. 18 months. I repeated the weight of those words settling over me. "We've been tracking her activities across state lines," Pierce explained, and as he spoke, he laid out photograph after photograph, images of women and men, elderly people with names written beneath them, Dorothy Hendricks, George Patterson, Ruth Hartwell, and others whose names I didn't recognize but whose faces told the same story. "We identified her as a suspect in connection with multiple suspicious deaths in Ohio and Pennsylvania," Pierce continued. "Detective Mitchell's team in Michigan provided crucial corroborating evidence that helped connect the cases." He tapped one of the folders with a pen. "We found Amber Hartwell in Toledo last night," Pierce said quietly. "She's already agreed to cooperate with federal authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's been providing us with detailed information about her and Victoria's operation, everything we need to build an airtight case. Operation," I said the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "That's what they called it." "That's exactly what it was," Pierce said, his expression grim. "A systematic, methodical operation designed to identify vulnerable targets, infiltrate their families, gain their trust, and extract their assets through poisoning." He spread more photographs across the table, each one a face, each one a victim. "Victoria Chambers is connected to 7 confirmed deaths across Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania," Pierce said, and his voice had taken on the flat, professional tone of someone who delivered this kind of news far too many times. "Those are just the ones we've been able to definitively link to her methods using toxicology reports and forensic evidence. There may be more that we haven't discovered yet. 7 deaths, 7 murders that had only partially made sense until this moment. 7 people who had trusted Diana, married her, or let her into their families, and paid for that trust with their lives. Margaret was one of them. I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way Sarah had looked at me earlier. Margaret Ashford was poisoned over a period of approximately 6 months. Pierce said, pulling out a detailed toxicology report with her name across the top. Trace amounts of aconitine, a toxic alkaloid consistent with Victoria's other victims. The method was perfected through her earlier crimes in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to process the fact that Margaret's death, a death I'd been led to believe was natural. Cancer had actually been carefully orchestrated murder, not accidental, not a disease that had simply taken her. Murder, deliberate and calculated. Later that night, when Diana was placed in an interrogation room and finally broke her silence, I was behind the two-way glass, watching her every movement. She sat across from FBI Agent Pierce and Detective Sarah Mitchell, her handcuffs removed, but her entire demeanor screaming of calculation and control. She'd requested an attorney, who sat beside her in a gray suit, but she seemed completely uninterested in his cautious advice. "You want to know the truth?" Diana said, and there was an almost conversational tone to her voice, as if she were about to share a recipe or a piece of gossip rather than confess to serial murder. "I'm very good at what I do. I identify elderly people who are lonely, who have money, whose children are weak or eager for inheritance. Then I marry into the family. Son, daughter doesn't matter. Once I'm inside the family structure, I become indispensable. I become the devoted caregiver, the perfect wife." She smiled, and the smile was almost proud, almost boastful. "Then I help them along." She continued, her voice cool and steady. "Small doses over time, nothing that triggers suspicion from doctors or family members. The family thinks it's natural decline. The doctors think it's disease. Any autopsy finds nothing unusual. By the time everything is said and done, the victim is gone, the inheritance is distributed, and I'm in a position to access the assets before moving on." "How many times have you done this?" Agent Pierce asked, his voice controlled. "Enough to perfect the method," Diana said. "Enough to know exactly which herbs work best, which compounds leave no trace, which families are desperate enough to want their elderly relatives gone anyway." "Margaret Ashford," Sarah said. "Why did you accelerate her death?" Diana's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of something that might have been calculation or might have been irritation at being questioned. "Margaret was becoming a problem," she said finally. "She was perceptive. She started asking questions. She was beginning to understand what was happening. I realized she was going to warn someone, and I couldn't allow that. So I accelerated her care, made sure she didn't live long enough to be a threat." "You murdered her because she recognized you," Sarah said flatly. "I eliminated a threat," Diana corrected, her voice sharp. "And I did it perfectly. You didn't even know she was murdered until this man decided to play detective in his own home. She looked directly at the two-way glass as if she could see me, even though I knew she couldn't. But somehow her eyes found me anyway. This old man surprised me," she continued, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost like respect. "He fought back. He was smarter than the others. Most people are too trusting, too willing to believe what you tell them, too eager to see the best in those around them. But this one—" She paused, tilting her head. "This one figured it out before I could complete the job." Agent Pierce leaned forward across the table. "Victoria Chambers, you understand that you're being charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder, plus multiple counts of fraud, identity fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Recordings, emails, video surveillance, forensic evidence, and testimony from your accomplice. What do you have to say for yourself?" Diana smiled, that same predatory smile I'd seen in my kitchen, the one that belonged to a woman who'd murdered my wife and had tried to murder me. "I have nothing to say," she replied coldly, "except that I was very good at what I did, and given the chance I would do it all again." The courtroom was absolutely silent as the judge looked down from her elevated bench, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. The wood-paneled walls seemed to close in, and the December sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast long shadows across every surface. It had been 8 weeks since Diana had been arrested in my kitchen. 8 weeks of investigation, interrogation preparation, and now, finally, judgment. The jury had been deliberating for less than 6 hours. The evidence was overwhelming. The confessions were recorded. The physical proof was undeniable. Victoria Chambers. The judge said, her voice carrying the absolute weight of the law. "You have been found guilty on all 7 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of identity fraud, and 5 counts of conspiracy to commit multiple felonies across state lines. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You are remanded into federal custody immediately." The courtroom erupted into a murmur that the bailiff quickly silenced, but Diana herself showed no reaction. She simply sat there in her orange prison jumpsuit, her face a mask of absolute indifference, as if this verdict was something she'd already experienced 1,000 times before, as if justice itself was beneath her concern. Officer Torres approached to lead her away, and as Diana stood, she turned for just a moment and looked directly at me. There was no fear in her eyes, no regret, no acknowledgement of what she'd done or what she'd taken from this world. She simply looked at me with that cold, predatory gaze, and then she was gone. Behind me, I heard Mitch release a breath he'd been holding since the trial began. His shoulders sagged with something that looked like a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd loved, was now federal property. She would spend the rest of her life in prison. 2 days after the verdict, Mitch came to me with a question that showed me just how far he'd come in those 8 weeks. "Dad," he said, and his voice was steady now, firmer than I'd heard it since this entire nightmare had begun. "Would it be okay if I testified in the federal case against Diana and Amber? As a witness in the broader investigation, I looked at my son and I saw someone who was rebuilding himself from the broken pieces of betrayal and manipulation." "Of course," I said. "That's absolutely the right thing to do." Mitch became a key witness in the federal prosecution of both Diana Chambers and Amber Hartwell. He testified about the manipulation, about the way Diana had gradually corrupted his judgment, about the pressure she'd exerted to make him complicit in plans he didn't fully understand. He testified about finding the burner phone, about discovering the truth, about the moment his entire world had collapsed. Most importantly, he testified that his father had investigated Diana, alone had gathered evidence, and had worked with law enforcement to bring her to justice. He testified that he had witnessed the truth, and he had chosen to stand with his father rather than protect his wife. It took courage, tremendous courage, but he did it anyway. Mid-December, on a day when the temperature had dropped and a light snow was beginning to fall, Mitch and I sat together in the kitchen with cups of hot coffee. The house had been cleaned and thoroughly restored after the forensic team had finished their work, but I could still feel the weight of those hours when Diana had stood at this counter, preparing poison with meticulous precision. Cody lay at my feet, completely calm and content, his golden head resting against my shoe. "Dad," Mitch said quietly, wrapping his hands around his mug as if seeking its warmth, "do you forgive me?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of all that had happened. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. "I forgave you the moment I understood that you didn't know what Diana really was," I said. "I forgave you the moment you realized the truth and chose to tell me instead of protecting her. I forgave you because you're my son and you made the right choice when it mattered most." Mitch's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't look away from me. "I still love her, you know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Part of me still loves who I thought she was, but I hate who she actually is. I hate what she did to you. I hate what she did to Mom. I hate that I was almost part of her plan." That's human," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. That's what it means to be human. You can love someone and hate them at the same time. You can mourn what you thought you had and celebrate the fact that you survived it. You can feel all of those contradictions and still be okay. That's actually what being human is all about. Mitch nodded slowly, and I could see the weight lifting from his shoulders a little more with each passing day. "I'm going to see a therapist," he said. "I need to understand how I was manipulated, why I let myself be manipulated, how to make sure it never happens again." That's wise," I said. "That's very wise." On Christmas Eve, the snow was falling more heavily. I sat outside on the porch chair. Cody pressed against my leg, his warm body a comfort against the cold. The sky was the color of old silver, and the snow fell in thick, silent flakes that seemed to contain the weight of the entire year. I thought about Margaret. I thought about her red leather diary, about the warnings she'd written with such careful precision, about the way she'd managed to leave clues for me, even after death had taken her voice. I thought about her suffering, about the months of slow poisoning that she'd endured while not knowing why, while watching her own body betray her. But mostly I thought about her courage. "She knew," I said to Cody, my hand stroking his soft fur. "Margaret knew everything. That's why she left me those letters. That's why she hid the diary in the attic. She knew that I would need it. She trusted that I would find it, that I would understand it, that I would use it to protect myself and to protect Mitch." Cody tilted his head, his ears perking slightly, and I could swear he understood every word. I sat there in the falling snow, and something crystallized inside me, a fundamental understanding of how the world works. Truth doesn't stay buried. It takes time, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, but truth always finds its way to the surface. It always prevails. Maybe not in the way we expect, maybe not as quickly as we'd like, but it always wins. And justice, when it finally arrives, carries with it a weight that can never be denied. "I love my wife," I said into the quiet evening, my voice barely above a whisper. "I love my son. I love this dog. And I believe in justice. I believe that truth matters. I believe that intuition matters. I believe that a dog who warns you is worth more than 1,000 promises. I believe that a mother's love can reach across death itself. And I believe that, in the end, justice prevails. Cody wagged his tail slowly, deliberately, his eyes closed in contentment, as if confirming everything I'd just said. Inside the house, I could see Mitch through the kitchen window. He was preparing Christmas dinner, not a meal designed to harm, not something wrapped in deception and poison, but something made with love and intention and care. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumentally significant. It felt like a promise. It felt like a beginning. The snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, transforming everything that had come before into something clean and new. The past was still there. It would always be there. A scar in my history, a marker of who I'd become. But the snow was covering it, offering the promise of renewal, of healing, of a future that didn't belong to Diana Chambers or her crimes. That future belonged to me. It belonged to Mitch. It belonged to Cody with his uncanny ability to sense danger in the scent of poison. It belonged to the memory of Margaret, who had loved me enough to warn me from beyond the grave. In the distance, I could hear Christmas carols playing from a neighbor's house, distant and tinny, but unmistakably full of hope and joy. Bells were ringing, the sound of a community settling into the holiday season, unaware of how close one of their own had come to destruction, grateful for a safety they took for granted. Cody rested his head on my leg and sighed contentedly, the warning dog finally at peace, because the danger had passed, because his work was done, because the man he loved had survived. And I sat there in the snow, grateful for a wife who'd loved me enough to warn me, grateful for a son who'd chosen truth over misplaced loyalty, grateful for a dog who had heard danger in the scent of poison and screamed it to the world, grateful most of all that justice had finally arrived. Looking back at everything that unfolded in my home, I cannot help but confront one painful truth: I was blind. Not because I lacked intelligence, but because I chose to see only the good in people. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound, because it comes from those we shelter under our roof, feed from our table, and welcome into our inner circle. If you are listening to this story right now, I need to tell you something. Clearly, don't be like me. Do not ignore the small warnings your gut is screaming at you. Do not mistake politeness for kindness. Do not allow the comfort of family obligation to override the danger signals your instincts are sending. This family story began with an ordinary man and an ordinary house in Michigan, but it became a lesson about the cost of misplaced trust. Margaret knew. She tried to prepare me through her diary, through her careful observations, through the love she left behind. God gave her the wisdom to see what I could not, and He gave me the grace to understand it before it was too late. The lesson is simple, but devastating family betrayal is real, it is deliberate, and it preys on the very foundation of human connection, love itself. Yet there is hope in this darkness. Mitch found his conscience. I found my strength. Cody found his peace. And Victoria Chambers is behind bars where she belongs. This family story is not just about survival. It is about redemption, about second chances, and about the unbreakable bond that forms when we choose truth over comfortable lies. The real victory belongs to those who stood together in the end, who chose each other over convenience, and who learned that love without vigilance is not love. It is vulnerability waiting to be exploited. When family betrayal strikes, the only path forward is through honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild what was broken. This is my warning. This is my truth. This is what it cost me to finally understand. Thank you for walking this journey with me all the way to the end. I would genuinely love to hear from you in the comments below. If you found yourself in this impossible situation of discovering a family member's deception, what would you do? Your perspective matters to me. If this family story touched your heart or opened your eyes, please consider subscribing to this channel so you never miss the stories that follow. A gentle reminder, while inspired by real documented cases of family crimes and poisoning networks, certain narrative elements have been dramatized for storytelling impact. If this content does not align with your viewing preferences, please feel free to explore other videos that may resonate more deeply with you.